G'day and welcome to episode 7 of Study Overseas Live. I'm Rob.
I'm Tash.
Today's a really important one, guys, and no jokes around this because I think it's such a taboo topic. We don't want to make any fuss about it. Today we're talking about mental health and how important it is to look after your mental health when you're studying overseas. So let's get into it. G'day and welcome to Study Overseas Live, episode number 7. I'm Rob Malicki.
And I'm Tash Kahari.
This is a really important episode, guys, an episode all about looking after your mental health when you are studying overseas. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about everything you need to know to do with culture shock, being isolated, those feelings of isolation when you're overseas, and most importantly, what to do about it. By the end of this episode, you should have a really good idea about the things you need to think about before you study overseas and what to do when things go wrong for you, if they go wrong when you're overseas. Study Overseas Live, this is the show for students who are interested in going to have an international study experience of some sort as part of their degree. Yeah. Kind of feel nervous today. Normally I don't feel nervous about being on live, but it's such an important topic.
Yeah, I think it's just a really important topic and we want to do it justice. We have some really valuable tips that we're going to share with you. If you have any tips or advice extra to what we're going to be talking about today, then you can hop over to the Study Overseas Live Facebook group, and or if you have an experience that you would like to share with other students that you think might help them, we would really appreciate that. I'm sure other students would really appreciate that as well. So
100%. There's too much stigma, guys, around mental health. Like, this is real for all of us. Everybody struggles with something, and the more we talk about, the things that we find difficult, and we talk about what we're going through, the easier it is for everybody. So please feel free to share your experiences. We'll be sharing our experiences throughout this episode as we go. Yeah.
Now we have Kayla Paradiso joining us from AIM Overseas to talk about Travel App of the Week. Hi, Kayla.
G'day, Kayla.
Hi guys, how are you?
Great.
Good.
What app have you got to show us today?
So the app I want to talk about today is called Down Dog Yoga, which is a yoga app. So one thing to note about yoga is that it is very beneficial for mental health and well-being, which is what we're talking about today. So the reason for that is because through yoga you're learning, deep mindful breathing, meditation, and connecting with your body. So through practicing yoga as well, you can really help build strength and flexibility, but it also helps with things like relaxation and relieving stress and anxiety, and improving sleep as well. So to tie that into traveling, so after a long flight, if you're feeling homesick or culture shock, and you're in your new surroundings, a quick flow yoga session, which you can do in this app, is a great thing to connect back, with your surroundings and, rid yourself of the feelings of culture shock.
That's awesome. I think I want to download this. I'm not even traveling anytime, but I really want to download this app. And the whole point of it is that you have an instructor that shows you while you do the yoga at the same time.
Yeah, so you can customize it. So the app is free to download. You will have to make in-app purchases for various programs. So they start at about $4. But if you don't want to do that, you can opt for the light version of the app, which is called Yoga for Beginners Down Dog, which is just as useful. So you can customize the length of your session. You can customize what kind of session you want as well. If you want a quick flow, if you want a full practice, you can, that's all kind of customizable. So it's a really cool app.
Such a good pickup, isn't it? Like, good choice, Kayla. That's awesome. I hadn't even really thought about, using apps for improving your mental health while you're traveling. But now I think about it, I
I use a meditation app called Calm, C-A-L-M, Calm, Calm, and it's got meditations on there specifically for like calming flight anxiety. There must be others out there as well.
Even just general training and exercise apps as well, just something that you can use quickly on the go. Obviously, if you're traveling to and from quite a lot of places, it's hard to exercise or have a gym membership. Sometimes you just want a quick workout, but you're not really sure what to do. So you just use this yoga app or use a circuit training app just to smash out a quick workout and improve your health.
The cool thing about this app as well, and Calm as well, is you can download the practice. You can download, a quick meditation, a meditation reading or whatever, and you can access that offline. So if you don't have access to data or Wi-Fi, you can still take advantage of the practice.
That's awesome. Yeah. And is it available on iPhone, Android? Is it a desktop version as well, or just the apps on phone?
All three of those. So Apple, Android, and desktop versions.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely recommend that. I'm going to download it right after this show.
Yeah,
drop in the show notes too. Hey, if you're watching this and you've got a recommendation for an app that you use or you know of that's really good just for general wellness, mindfulness, health and well-being that people might benefit from overseas, drop it in the comments for us. That would be super helpful. The other thing that we'll put in the show notes, I was listening recently to a podcast that I love. It's a terrible name, but it's called Found My Fitness. But it's basically like a researcher in the USA who goes out and looks into what the science says. So looks at all the academic research about particular topics. And the episode I was just listening to was around how you can use exercise as a treatment for depression, and there's extraordinarily good evidence around it. I'll drop the link to that episode. It's like a 15-minute episode, but totally relevant to what we're talking about in this episode with, mental health, getting out there, getting some exercise when you first touch down. Oh, sunlight. The other one is that you got to do when you touch down, get sunlight, make sure you get outside and get some actual natural light. It'll help you with your mood.
Good tip.
Exactly. There's just so much out there.
Oh yeah, there's actually, I've seen it too. There's a whole app around that now I think about it, like a whole app that's around synchronizing your circadian rhythm to a new environment. So there's an app that tells you like when to go to sleep in the lead up to a trip. Yeah. And once you arrive there, how to like readjust. Yeah, it's
that
cool
amazing.
Stuff out there.
There you go. Not just one travel app of the week. You had
exactly
2, 3 in a podcast recommendation.
Yeah, amazing.
Awesome. Thanks so
Kayla.
much, Kayla.
Great to see you. Next week.
Bye.
Such an important tip, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like just look after yourself when you're traveling.
Yeah.
It helps out very much so. And I think a lot of people, when they think about going traveling, they will plan to have travel insurance, but they don't plan about how they're going to look after their mental health. And that's really critical.
Yeah, I think it is all about planning. And so that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, well, so let's start off by talking a little bit about some of the main thing that you'll hear as you're preparing for your overseas study experience is this idea of culture shock and cultural adaptation. In a couple of words, Tash, because we've got a little animation to play for everybody, what is this?
Yeah, so culture shock is basically coming from an environment that you're familiar with and putting yourself into an environment that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a bad thing to go through, and I think it's very, very, very common. I think everyone would have experienced some sort of culture shock through travels or through studying overseas, and it just doesn't happen in a place where is just necessarily foreign to you. It can happen in a place. It can happen. I got a little bit of culture shock in my 3-week program going to study in America, where everyone speaks English and a lot of the values are the same. So it can affect everyone in quite a different way. I think the important thing is just to know when you're having culture shock and then have a plan in place to try and help you through that.
Yeah, good one. Let's have a little
deep dive into culture shock, because this is one of the genesis of a lot of the kind of difficulties that people run into, particularly in the early stages of an international study experience.
We are all familiar with our hometown, home uni, home culture and values. We go through day-to-day life easily because we are fluent in our culture's social cues, such as when to hold the door or to offer a cup of tea to a friend. When we immerse ourselves in a new culture, we have to learn many things. How to get around, what to eat, how to speak, and how to act appropriately. At a global society, we call the process of learning these things the cultural adaptation cycle. This is Norbert. He's travelled abroad for uni and he's about to demonstrate the different stages of cultural adaptation. Upon arriving in a new environment, we often feel excited, optimistic and in awe. We're intrigued by new sights, sounds and smells. This is the honeymoon phase. We see the differences between our host culture and our home culture, and we tend to focus on the positive aspects of the new environment. At some point after entering a new environment, the awe of the new culture will wear away. Differences that once seemed quaint may now appear more like hurdles or annoyances. Small challenges become devastations. We may begin to resent our host culture and attribute negative feelings towards our overseas experience. We call this the slump phase, or more commonly known as culture shock. The slump can happen at different times and in different ways for each of us, and its symptoms can affect us physically and mentally. Common symptoms include recurrent illness and changes in your eating habits and sleeping habits, homesickness, and persistent negativity towards the host culture, bouts of frustration and irritability, and feelings of sadness and depression, self-doubt, and withdrawing from friends and other people and activities. While the slump may affect us differently, it's important to remember that we all feel culture shock in some way. Our feelings or struggles are normal and likely being experienced by others too. We should be patient and give ourselves time to work through the slump. Some tips that will assist us in overcoming this challenging phase include: recognise that this unpleasant stage of cultural adaptation is only temporary. Get out into the host culture, visit and explore your new surroundings, and join in on activities and organisations that the host uni provides. Take time to reflect and put your feelings and observations down in a journal. You can talk to someone about your experiences and don't be afraid to laugh at your mistakes. Having a routine that includes eating well, exercising and getting enough sleep is helpful too. And if you're in a second language environment, work on those language skills. With time and patience, we begin to realise the positive outcomes of cultural adaptation. We begin to recover from culture shock and acclimatise to the host culture. We develop an understanding for not only how things are done, but why. This is the realisation phase. Through this, we accept differences more willingly. We navigate the world around us more easily, and we are more confident. Eventually, our new home will no longer be new, and instead feels like a second home. We will have regained emotional stability and are able to live and study to our full potential. We will have built meaningful connections with our second home. We recognise that we've changed as a result of our experiences and begin to meld this with our identity. This is the adaptation phase. For most, reaching adaptation is not the end of the cultural adaptation cycle. We may encounter relapses of culture shock and enter into feelings of frustration or sadness once again. However, having recognised and coped with culture shock once before, we can move forward more confidently using successful strategies. Likely, we will continue to achieve successes and milestones. We will also develop a deeper understanding of our second home. Then we'll return home. When returning from our overseas experience, we'll be reminded once again that our perception of the world and our home has changed, that we have changed. Relearning the routines of our home or uni may be frustrating at first. We may struggle to find ways to include our new perspectives in our day-to-day life. However, never doubt. As we have already learned, these feelings are normal and common. We simply need to adapt.
Such an important piece of content, that one. We'll drop the link to that video
Yeah.
in the show notes. We'll also drop in a link to this flyer that you can see on screen right now, the Cultural Adaptation Cycle. Once again, my team is the Global Society, and we've created this really nice flyer where we talk about the different stages. You have to remember as well is that like once you go through that adaptation and you come home, you can have reverse culture shock,
Yes.
which is this strange feeling of getting home and being like, hang on a second, this isn't quite like I remember it. Well, it's not as good as being off travelling, but I think we'll cover that a little bit later.
Yeah, we can do a whole nother topic on that.
We'll do a whole nother bit on this. So, okay, Tash, what can we do? People are feeling a little bit homesick. We understand a little bit about how culture shock, homesickness might manifest itself.
Yeah.
What can we actually do about it?
Yeah, well, I might just say before we jump into the really valuable tips that we're going to share with you, this is obviously a really important episode and a really important topic. So please take everything what we're going to say on board, and please, if you have a friend that is going to be traveling, or if you have a friend who is also studying overseas or thinking about it, then share this episode with them, because we can't talk about this enough to make it something that we should all be talking. Remove the stigma. So share with a friend. And
keep an eye out, because you'll have friends and family who go travelling around the world at different times. You will notice all of a sudden that their engagement with you may change. They may suddenly be, in touch with you on Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever else you're using to stay in touch, on the phone, and you notice that they just don't seem quite like themselves anymore. That's a really good sign that they may be experiencing a little bit of culture shock. So keep an eye out for your friends and family who are offshore travelling as well, because it could affect them. Cool.
We'll jump into our tips.
Let's jump into some tips. So this is really actionable, okay? So hopefully by the end of this, you should be able to put together a bit of a plan for yourself as to how to prepare and what to do about it when you get overseas, if things happen to you.
Mm-hmm. So tip number 1 is try and not isolate yourself. So when you are feeling a bit down and a bit overwhelmed, no matter where it's when you first get there or a couple months in, it's important that you do try not to isolate yourself, because that will it can become a very dark place, and you can, I guess, spiral. It's not great. I think the best thing to do is just try and get out, explore, go for a walk, say yes to some social events, and you might find that being surrounded by other people will kind of like force you into putting a smile on your face, which actually can really positively impact your mood and make you feel happy.
So important.
Making personal connections instead of just sticking by yourself and kind of being in that slump by yourself.
Yeah. It's funny to say, I'm a bit of an introvert. And when I did my exchange program, my host university in Oxford had all of these orientation events. And I would go along to those and I'd meet some people, and after about half an hour, because I'm naturally a little bit introverted, I was just like, I kind of had enough of this, overexposure. And I would go back to my dorm room and basically read a book or something like that. And in retrospect, I think I was probably suffering a little bit of being out of my depth, a bit of overexposure. But as you say, Tash, sometimes just pushing through that discomfort is actually a good thing, because it does help you meet new people and make connections. One of the best things actually that happened to me when I was on that exchange was I joined a whole bunch of clubs. I joined the travel club, which was brilliant. And through that, I actually got to meet a bunch of people, and that helped me form my network offshore. We'll talk more about networks in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
So
I also had a very similar experience, Rob.
Yeah.
In that when I did my short-term exchange, I went over to San Francisco first, and then I flew over to Michigan, so it was a red-eye flight. And the last thing that I wanted to do was go to this orientation that was planned for us. And, you rock up at your dorm room and you're unpacking, and you're expected to, just go into this orientation and meet a bunch of people that you've never met before, you haven't talked to before, and to me that was a little bit overwhelming. I'm very different now. I think I was very much an introvert back then, but funnily enough, I feel like I am an extrovert now. So back then, it was very new to me, and it was the last thing that I wanted to do, but I forced myself to go, and I'm so glad because that first day was when I made the best connections and people who I still talk to today. So if I missed that, it wouldn't have been a very good start for me, and it would have set a precedent to when I'm feeling like a bit overwhelmed or stressed with the uni work, I would have just isolated myself. So don't try not to do that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, next one. Let's make a routine. Let's talk about routines and why they're important. Certainly, I think one of the things you've mentioned is the importance of getting out and getting some sunlight, getting some exercise, getting into those habits early, because that helps you kind of connect you back to your routines and your habits back at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which can help you adapt.
Yeah, and Rob, I think what's important as well with this is sleep. I think sleep is so important for your routine, and Rob was talking before about an app that you can download that helps you sync to the location that you're in. I just can't underestimate how important sleep is. It can be very easy just to be, I'm just going to take a nap and don't set an alarm, wake up 2 hours later, and you've overslept, you don't have time to study, you've missed some activities that you wish you were going to. I just think maybe make a plan of how you would like to start. So if you usually wake up at 8 o'clock at home, maybe do the same thing when you're overseas. Plan to wake up, plan to go for a walk, fit your study time in, try and fit your social activities in. Obviously, it's not always going to stay to plan, but I think just setting a routine up from the beginning for yourself is going to help you so much.
Yeah, and write it down. We've said it already several times, and we can't understate it. Like, isolation is what's going to lead to bigger trouble downstream. The more you can get out of your comfort zone and you can engage with other people, even when you're feeling crappy, is where you'll start to make the connections that'll help you adapt to your environment. And that goes whether or not you've had any kind of mental health, suffered from anything back here in Australia before you go, or whether it's just cultural shock. It can happen to anybody at any time. Isolation is one of those things that's really, really difficult to deal with. The best way you can do it, write yourself up a daily plan for that first part of the trip, even if it's only your first week, which is like, I'm going to set my alarm for 8 o'clock. I'm going to get up, I'm going to go for a walk, so you're getting familiar with your surrounding environment, you're getting a little bit calibrated. I'm going to have a coffee at the uni cafe, so that you kind of start feeling that surroundings and getting yourself into that sort of routine, etc., etc. Write your exercise in and stick to the freaking plan, because then when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and isolation is bad because we're just stuck with the voice in our head, aren't we? Like, you're in your room and the only one person that's talking to you is this blah, 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 like chatty voice. We've all got it in our heads. Like, that's not, like, you're not crazy. Everyone has it. You can get away from that just by looking at the piece of paper. Now it's lunchtime. I need to go and, take myself down to the cafeteria and, introduce myself to somebody, some random person,
Yeah, and I think with making a routine as well, it's important to set little goals for yourself. I think that really helps, and alongside writing them down as well. So if you have access to it, or a whiteboard while you're studying overseas, I know that helps me. I have that weekly. Actually, I write a little plan for myself for the week.
Nice.
And little goals, and it feels so good when you just tick off those goals. Yes, I'm going to drink 2 litres of water a day.
Oh, God.
Very
most of
the
time. Make a routine. Set realistic expectations for yourself. Yeah, as humans, I think we're all too hard on ourselves all of the time. And forgive yourself for your faults. We've all got things that are difficult for us, and it's completely normal for you to feel out of place when you go to a new environment. Number one, forgive yourself for those feelings, because it's okay and it's normal. But what else do we mean by setting realistic expectations?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that it's very easy to hear from people of their amazing study abroad experiences, their amazing travelling experiences. You hear the highlights of those experiences. So it's important to note that everyone has the struggle, whether they're travelling or studying overseas. Everyone has the bad times that they probably don't talk about, they don't mention to you. And if we're hearing the good things all the time, then that's going to set a precedent to think, oh, I'm going to go study overseas and it's going to be amazing. It is going to be amazing, but everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows. Nothing's going to go wrong. But
It's
in
like
reality,
it's like the Instagram study abroad experience, right?
Yeah.
The Instagram.
Yeah, just the highlight. You see the highlight reel. You don't see the people who
People
are
struggling.
who are stressed.
Even on freaking Instagram, right? Like all of those perfect people doing perfect things, traveling in their perfect world, in perfect clothes, eating perfect meals, have shitty days. And, you know, the more we just admit that that's just like the gloss on the surface and that everyone has this natural up and down in life and we forgive ourselves for our faults, you know, then you can be realistic that this experience is going to be transformational for you. It doesn't mean that it's all going to be like roses and peach blossoms.
Yeah, and just like you get stressed at home of a uni or relationship, you'll have the same stresses overseas. So
Definitely.
it's completely normal.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, you know, if you've got classes to take on, yeah, absolutely, you'll have the same stresses and pressures from assignments and things coming due, etc. So, yeah, setting yourself a good routine and having realistic expectations as well. Actually, about expectations too, you know, on the academic side, you know, a lot of high achievers go and do international study experiences too and might feel like they need to be still like knocking out HDs or A's while they're overseas. And, you know, in a lot of cases, if you're doing an exchange program, that HD might not actually transfer back as a, you know, HD grade in Australia. It might just go back as like, you know, satisfactory or unsatisfactory, basically. Yeah, like, so it doesn't count to your GPA, in which case, like, go easy on yourself and enjoy the experience a bit rather than just being absolutely crazy about having to chase those grades.
Yeah.
Because when you're outside your comfort zone in another environment and you're really pushing hard on the academic side, that can put extra stress on that you probably don't need. Great. What's point number 4?
Number 4 is, I think, really important. So don't forget to check in with yourself. It's okay. I know we talked about not isolating yourself and going out and do all these social activities. But it's also okay to take a step back and think, okay, I am feeling quite overwhelmed now. What I do need is just to spend a little bit of time by myself. And I might do something that I really enjoy. I'll do some journaling or I'll do some scrapbooking. I'm really missing home. I think I might call my mum and just have a good chat with her because I know that'll make me feel really good. Just try and be in touch with yourself and, like Rob said, to just forgive yourself as well.
Honestly, one of the toughest times I've ever had a couple of years ago, it was at work, but it translates to the story, I suppose. You know, like, I've been under heaps of pressure, you know, things were really tough, had a big workload, been putting in lots of hours, and basically, like, I just didn't see all of that stress and pressure accumulating until suddenly one day I was just sitting there and I was just like, oh shit, like, I'm done. Like, I'm cooked today, and I had like a bit of a breakdown and had to get out of the office for a couple of days just because I was absolutely fried. And if I was honest with myself, looking back, I can definitely see how all of the warning signs were there. The fatigue was there. I was trying to push too hard. I was still getting up early and doing this and doing that. And I just completely ignored what should have actually, what was freaking obvious.
Yeah.
And that happens when you're traveling too. Just like you've said, you know, you're like, oh, well, I'm only here for a week or 3 weeks or a month. I have to make the most out of it. Too much pressure. And then you can suddenly find yourself boiling over a little bit.
Yeah. So it's okay if you don't go to every social event, social
100%.
Activity. I did that on my 3-week program, and because it was only 3 weeks, I had that mindset like I have to go to everything. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to make sure I have amazing grades and study. But there was a couple of times where I did say no to these social events because I really needed to take a break for myself and just really needed a nap.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that it would be very easy to look past that, like you said, Rob, and just ignore the warning signs.
Mm.
So yeah, it's really important that you just take a moment sometimes to just think about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
and
So
just
don't
be
ignore
aware.
the warning signs. Tip 5.
Yeah, I guess this is
Kind of covered this, haven't we?
we have. I think it's a little bit obvious, but really important. I think there's so much research that goes into how having a balanced diet and having a good exercise routine can positively impact your mental health.
Mm. That was
So-
that podcast that I mentioned about, exercise is essentially a treatment for depression in some ways for some people. So, listen to that podcast if you do suffer from depression and have a think about how you might alter your exercise routine. And then also, here we can start, Tash, talking a little bit about how to prepare for this in advance. How are you going to maintain your exercise routine while you're overseas? If you're a rower and you're going on exchange to Arizona or somewhere else, maybe there's water in Arizona, but maybe not. How are you going to maintain that exercise routine that you have? Because once you lose that, I'm a cyclist. Actually, that's a funny story. I'm a mountain biker. When I went and did my exchange program in the UK, weather in the UK is not always the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined the mountain biking club thinking that this was going to be like a brilliant way for me to get to meet people. And I went out on one ride with them because they took us out on these trails, and fair dinkum, it had rained so much there. It was just like we just rode through mud for an hour. And I was wet and cold, and I just didn't enjoy it at all.
It's a bit different.
It was very, very different. If I'd looked up in advance, I would have probably known that.
Mm-hmm.
But so what I ended up doing was switching and doing a whole bunch of cycle touring instead.
Mm.
So I took my same bike, put a bit of luggage on the back, like some bags, and then I ended up like cycling on the roads because, that thing that I love doing, the mountain biking, I couldn't do because conditions were just, I don't know what they were thinking, but it wasn't fun.
Yeah, so it's important that if you do have a particular exercise that you love doing, maybe research it before you go to see if it's accessible. I think if you're going to study at a university, you might have access to the gyms on university. I know a lot of them have gymnasiums where it might be free, you might pay a little bit. I know when I did my short-term exchange, it was something like $4 to access the local gym. I didn't, but only because we were doing so much walking anyway. It was a 20-minute walk to get to our classes every day, and then 20 minutes to get to the cafeteria. So we're doing so much walking, so I really didn't feel like I wanted to put that extra stress of like having to work out on top of that. I think also as well is that there's, if you don't have access to a gym, as we talked about before, there's so many apps. There's so many apps that you can have access to, and not only apps, but YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube is amazing. Look up some aerobics exercises. There's free YouTube for yoga or Pilates. There's so much on
I would
offer.
definitely recommend the clubs. If you join clubs, if you like any kind of sport and you're going to a lot of different countries, all these, they have different clubs and societies, make sure you join those because it's a great way for you to meet people as well as getting your exercise in.
I might just touch on
Sure.
eating a balanced diet as well,
Yep.
because there's so much research into what you put into your body, how it makes you feel mentally, and you can get very overwhelmed very quickly going to a new country and wanting to try all the foods, where the foods might not necessarily be the healthiest for you. So for example, when I first went to America for just a holiday, I was like, I need all the burgers, I need all the pizza, I need all the hot dogs, and I just felt ruined. I felt very lethargic. I got very, very, very run down. I was not feeling well at all. So for the next time when I went for my short-term study program, I made sure that I really did balance my meals. So I was, this cafeteria was massive. It was massive. They had all the typical American foods, but then they had salad bars and I don't know, you can make your own sandwiches and healthy stir fries. So just having a plan and making sure that if you are planning to eat like a little bit of a naughty meal at night, then have like maybe something light during the day, and portion sizes as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good things to think about. All right. Communication. Before you actually leave Australia, you can look into what facilities are available for you. So if you do have a mental health illness, whether it's mild or fairly significant, first and foremost, like make sure you're talking with your professional support network here in Australia. So you have a doctor or a psychologist that you usually see. Make sure you let them know in advance what you're going to do. It's also really important if you're on medication that you stock up before you go. Whilst most major medications are available in, particularly Western countries, not everywhere you're going to go might have exactly what you need. It's well accepted common practice that your doctor will prescribe you enough of your medication to cover you for the time that you're away. Along with that, they should also write you out a letter that explains why you're carrying like a
bag of goodies.
A commercial quantity of whatever it is that you take. That letter is really important if you're going through like customs in various countries, just to show if they do pull you up why you're carrying enough to cover the entire duration of your trip, because not all medication is equivalent across the world, and if you're on a treatment plan, you want to make sure that you stick to that as best as possible. So this starts before you go, preparation.
Yeah, and even in your application process as well, I think it's really important to just be open and honest in your application to study overseas, because there will be questions about chronic illnesses, and that does include like anxiety disorder, illnesses and depression, and that usually all the time they're not asking you just to know that about you. It's just so they can help you. So that can help you put a plan together alongside the host university. So it's really important. You don't want to get over to your host institution and feel like you don't have support. So by putting it on your application in the beginning, you'll know that you'll have support from the get-go.
Yeah.
Before you even get there.
And just to speak to that, like having literally worked in this for over a decade and sent thousands of students, I've had cases where some people have, advised that they have pretty complex kind of cases and conditions that they need to deal with. But because we've known it in advance, we've been able to plan out that strategy for how that's going to be managed while they're away. So working with the professionals here in Australia to ensure that everything is as it should be in the lead up to the trip, reduce anxiety before a trip, and then when that student is overseas, making sure they have everything they need in terms of support network to have a successful experience. And that's what's most important. This is about your success. On the other side of that, I've also looked after plenty of students who haven't advised in advance, that something's going on in their life that we should know about. Whether it's like acute, something's just popped up, or chronic, have ended up going offshore and had like things have gone wrong. Like straight away they've run into trouble with their mental health. And it's not that professionals overseas or in Australia can't help you at that case, at that time. They can, but you're playing catch up. You're reacting to a situation instead of being proactive about the management of a situation. And that's what's so important. The massive difference between declaring and putting things up front is that people want to help you. They can only help you if they know. It's 2019 right now, nearly 2020. Like, we're done with the stigma on this stuff, okay? Professional organisations will absolutely help you with this, so make sure you communicate fearlessly about it. And let's be honest, if somebody looks at you sideways when you go through that process, shame on them, not shame on you. Yeah. That's almost a Rob's rant, wasn't it?
Rob's rant.
I feel really passionately about this. Like, I think it's so unfair on not just young people, but any person that's struggling with something, to feel ashamed, like they can't honestly communicate about something which is part of their fundamental nature. We are how we are, and we should just love each other and love ourselves for what we are. Is that enough? I think I've ranted enough through that point. Thank you.
This kind of ties
bit
into our
overlap.
next tip number 7,
Yeah.
which is to try and recreate your support network. So back in your home university or your hometown, you'll have your parents, your uni friends, your school friends, extended family to support you. It's good to note that when you are overseas in a different country, you can't fully rely on them like you usually would because of time differences. You're not face to face. It's a very different dynamic. Of course, you can still contact them, but it's going to be very different. So it's good to try and make friends while you are overseas and join clubs and societies where you can connect with people so that you have that support network there. And not only that, but your program coordinators or your international office on your host institution, they're there for you as well. They can be part of your support network. So ties into the last tip, but be open and have good communication with them about how you're feeling, so you can rely on people who are in your time zone to help you when you are feeling a little bit down or a bit stressed. Or
Absolutely. I would also say if you have a condition that you need to manage, wherever possible, before you even leave Australia, you can be trying to find somebody overseas who will be part of your support network. So whether that's the counselling service or a psychologist in the town where you're going to be going and studying, if you know you need that, introduce yourself in advance. Reach out to those people in advance. The more that you are making people aware of what's going on in your life, the more they can help you. And particularly if you have an existing condition that you need to manage, that little investment of time, hopefully you don't need to use it, but it could actually come back and pay massive dividends for you, because the moment you start feeling out of sorts, that network is already there for you, ready to be activated.
Yeah, we've just seen how important it is to be prepared and plan in advance.
So much. And that very much goes to like our last tip number 8. Know where to go to seek help. Look it up in advance. Obviously, if you're going on an exchange program, most universities in the places where Australian universities send students have got very good facilities. They're comprehensive. They might have medical doctors. They might have mental health professionals on campus. The US is amazing for their support services. They'll have services inside the dorms, residential services for students even. But look this stuff up in advance. And if it's something that you worry about, talk to your Australian university before you get on the plane about what you need so that you can plan that out.
I don't have anything else to add. A good tip might be just to Google mental health support and your host institution that you're going to. I think that's a good place to start, or go and talk to your international office, because that's what they're there for, the organisation that you're studying overseas with.
Yeah, and I guess where to go for help isn't only limited to like mental health practitioners or medical practitioners. It's also things like travel insurance companies. If you're with a university in Australia that works with, for example, International SOS, an amazing organisation, they actually have support services that you can access as well. Check with your university here in Australia what sort of insurance coverage you have. Are you covered by an organisation like International SOS? And how do you access those support services when you need them? Because almost all of these big insurers, International SOS or other providers like them, they've got a phone number that you can call. So if you really hit the wall and you need help, you can always call someone, and you're going to be speaking to someone back here in Australia that will be able to like guide you through what you need to do next. Yeah. Cool. I think it's maybe time for us to transition a bit.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Sounds good. Now we have Jackie Peters with our Country Deep Dive segment. Hi, Jackie.
G'day, Jackie.
Guys, thanks for having me back once again. So this Country Deep Dive will be focusing on Canada. I've never actually been myself, but I was talking to some of the other girls in the office, and quite a few of them have gone, and they had so many tips for me that I'm very happy to be passing on to you all. So have you guys been to Canada at all?
We were just talking.
I've been for a Jack Johnson concert, and then I went for a conference as well, but only twice to Vancouver. So I would say no. It doesn't really qualify.
Yeah, I would say on the no side as well. Kind of, but no. I spent a weekend at Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, so I feel like I can't really say I've been.
What is that count?
Right.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd start with the basics today. So with the public transport, just a little hint for anyone flying into Vancouver, the airport's actually quite far outside the city, but there's a train right outside the airport that makes it very easy to come back in. Now, the public transport's pretty good, pretty efficient, but it's different for each main city. So there's like Presto for Toronto, and then Opus for something else, and then there's TransLink for Vancouver, I think. So there's just a lot of different ones. So keep that in mind for when you're organising where you actually want to go. The Canadian dollar is pretty similar to the Australian dollar, although I do love this. They have loonies and toonies, which I just enjoy.
Sorry, what are
Which are
loonies
what?
and toonies? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they call the $1 and $2 coins. A loonie.
Cool.
I really like that. That would probably be a main reason for me to go, just to use that.
Nice.
And finally, just talking about if you want to get a SIM card over there, it's Bell, TELUS and Rogers are the main service providers, but it is mainly like a post-paid country. So the prepaid deals aren't fantastic, and you have to pay up to like 60 Australian dollars just to get a few gigabytes. However, there are a lot of Wi-Fi spots, particularly in the main cities, like in Tim Hortons, Starbucks and McDonald's. You're always going to have free Wi-Fi. So it is doable without a SIM card if you prefer.
And we did talk in episode 1 about that app for finding Wi-Fi hotspots. So if you're interested in that, make sure you go back and check out episode 1 of Study Overseas Live, where we talk all about the different apps that you need. Canada, I mean, best well known for the amazing outdoors, right? Like sort of rite of passage for a lot of Aussies to go and work at the snowfields up at Whistler and Calgary, those sort of places, not that far from BC, a few hours away. And really high class education system. If you're thinking of going there on exchange, some of the very best universities in North America, UBC, University of British Columbia, in Vancouver, University of Toronto is extremely well known, but just a huge range of institutions across the country. And, it's basically as broad as Australia geographically. This amazing diversity of landscapes, which means you can pretty much find a university that's going to suit your taste, whether it's in a big city like Vancouver or Toronto, right into like little places like New Brunswick. A lot of diversity there. So pretty amazing study overseas destination.
Yeah, 100%. The girls had a few little tips for must eats while you're over there as well. So I think it's pretty similar, like culture wise. But they said you have to obviously try Tim Hortons donuts and bagels, beaver tails, and poutine. They were like, poutine, you have to try poutine.
Cool.
So,
And what is poutine?
there's some,
What is poutine?
I think it's you can like decide what you want it, but it's chips covered with like gravy and cheese and bacon or whatever else you want to add to it. And it sounds really yum, but also I don't know how much of that I could eat.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And just a few little interesting facts about Canada that I found out myself. There's a polar bear jail in Canada, which I thought was very interesting. It turns out it's because Canada has the largest population of polar bears in the world. But basically what happens is sometimes the polar bears break into their homes, and so they have to call the ranger, and the ranger comes and takes him to the polar bear jail until they can suitably release him back into the wild. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
The world is a wonderful and weird place, isn't it?
We have no experience with in Australia.
Yeah, no, that's right.
We get slack for our snakes and spiders, but I think I prefer that to a polar bear in my home.
Yeah.
Spider won't eat you. There's one thing I remember, like, when I was considering where I was going to go on an exchange program, I was thinking about, because back then there was no information really about studying in non-English speaking countries. So to me, it was like America, Canada, or the UK that I was really looking at. And I remember kind of rejecting going to Canada, thinking it was going to be too cold. And of course, it's an enormous country once again. If you go right into the heart of it, yeah, winters there are going to be absolutely freezing. But if you stick to the coast, it's still quite temperate. In British Columbia is very, very temperate. And I think the thing to also say about a country like Canada, much like Europe, it's very much set up for the cold, even though it might get down to -40 or something like that. Places like Toronto essentially are set up so underground tunnels and buildings are connected by bridges and things like that. So you almost don't need to go outside into those extreme conditions when it is really freaking cold, and just good clothing, right?
Yeah.
You've been in North America, like you go and buy proper winter gear there, really cheap. Whereas here in Australia, you try and buy a big jacket, it can be super expensive, but there it's like survival gear.
Yeah.
So it's super cheap.
So if students are going overseas on exchange or just to travel in Canada in winter, you'd recommend buying gear over there?
Yeah. Show up with the absolute minimum that you need, like go to Canada.
Bring some thermals and some layers to go over there. But once you're over there, invest in a really good jacket, like Rob said, because that's where you're going to get the quality because they're prepared for it. Yeah.
And it's so much cheaper than here. Although populations are much bigger, so it's a lot more competitive there for good gear. So definitely, North America, buy your clothing over there rather than here before you go.
Cool.
Sorry.
You go ahead, Jackie.
I was just going to say one stereotype that I found to be true about Canada is the maple syrup stereotype. So apparently Canada produces 77% of the world's maple syrup.
Wow.
So heading over to Canada, prepare yourself for some serious syrup.
Yeah, hotcakes and syrup.
And bacon.
Hotcakes, syrup, and bacon.
And bacon.
I feel like that'd be. I want to try that. That's going on the list of must-eats.
There we go. You were going to say, Tash?
Well, I was going to say, I've also heard that Canadians are just generally known for being super lovely, super nice people. Did you come across that in your research as well, Jackie?
I actually had a Canadian roommate here in Australia, and he was the loveliest guy that you ever will meet. And in my own travels, when I've met Canadians, you know how like Canadians and Americans kind of sometimes sound alike?
Mm-hmm.
You could just tell straight away they were Canadian because they were so lovely and they were so nice. Like, not saying Americans aren't nice, but they went like above and beyond. So I would say that's another stereotype that's quite true. They're just so lovely.
Confirmed.
Awesome. Well, great to chat with you again, Jackie, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys.
Jackie, bye.
Another good deep dive. I really enjoy talking about different countries.
I'm learning a lot.
And Canada. Can't wait to get there at some point for a really good trip. Yeah, like before we wrap up, how about we do like a little summary of what we've talked about, Tash?
Yep.
The different points that we went through, just so if people are preparing a plan, they can run through each of these elements and make sure that they've kind of got them all covered. I'm just going to back right up to number one here.
I might mention as well is that we will put this into the Facebook group, so make sure you join the Study Overseas Live community on Facebook, because we'll post all of these tips there. We'll put like a little infographic together that you can download, so you can have it handy as well, quick access, so you don't have to watch the whole hour show again. You can if you want. We talked about some great stuff, but we'll put that together for you.
Let's do this in 1 minute. 8 tips in 1 minute, and that way we're going to have ourselves a nice little 1 minute video that we can share as well about after this as well. We're ready?
Yep.
Here are our 8 tips for taking care of your mental health while you're on international study experience. Tash.
1, try not to isolate yourself. You're not going to do yourself any favours. Try to get out, get some vitamin D, spend some time with people.
Number 2, make yourself a routine. So whatever your habits are here, try to make sure that you set yourself up so that you can actually follow a similar routine over there that helps bust that kind of isolation pattern and helps you adapt to your environment.
Number 3, set realistic expectations for yourself. Not everybody's experience that you hear from is, they're not going to tell you about the negative times. So just just forgive yourself. Be kind to yourself. And
Not everything is Instagram perfect.
Yeah.
Things will be tough. Don't worry about it. It's normal. Number 4, don't forget to check in. If something is feeling strange to you and you're not feeling 100% right, that's because something possibly isn't right. Pay attention to the warning signs and talk to somebody about it.
tip number 5, eat a balanced diet and exercise. It's going to do wonders for your mental health.
Nothing helps you more than like getting that exercise, that endorphin hit, that outdoor energy. Cool. Number 6, openly communicate before you go and when you arrive. Make sure you let know the people that are part of your support network know how you're feeling. If you need to get things like scripts or advice before you go, see your mental health professionals before you leave the country to let them know what's going on.
Tip number 7, recreate a support network. You're not going to have the same access that you would to your friends and family. So make sure that you reach out to people who you are surrounded with, not only new friends that you make, but your program coordinators as well.
Look up your health, like if you've got a psychologist you see here in Australia, try and find the name of somebody that you can, be in touch with when you're overseas. That will help you out. Oh, that's tip number 8. That's it. That's done in a minute. High fives. High fives. Oh, we should do that properly. It's been a good episode. Our unsung hero.
Yes.
Who is our unsung hero?
Unsung hero of the week is Kim Sainsbury from Southern Cross University. She's been amazing to work with. She really cares about sending the students overseas. I know a lot goes behind the scenes. She's always very quick to respond to us. When I know she must have a million things going on. So we appreciate you, Kim, and your love for international study.
Our unsung hero is always somebody that, does an amazing thing to support students just like you to study overseas, who hasn't sought the limelight, but certainly deserves some. So thank you, Kim. We appreciate you. That's it for this week's show. We will see you next week on Study Overseas Live, where we'll have another great topic. Once again, join the Study Overseas Live community. There we'll be posting all of the links and content that we've talked about today. And you can join in a conversation with your friends and peers from around Australia who are also interested in overseas study. Tash, great chatting as always.
Yes.
See you next week.
See you next week.